The day my daughter got married, I smiled through every photograph, shook every hand, and congratulated the happy couple as though nothing unusual had happened in my life. No one at that vineyard knew that less than 3 months earlier I had inherited almost $9 million. I never mentioned it, not to relatives, not to old friends, and certainly not to my daughter or the man she had just married. Looking back now, that silence was the smartest decision I ever made. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 61 years old and have spent most of my life in a quiet neighborhood outside Pittsburgh. After teaching woodworking and drafting at the local high school for more than 30 years, I retired with a modest pension, a paid-off house, and an old pickup truck that I enjoyed restoring in my garage. I wasn't wealthy, but I never wanted much beyond a peaceful life. My father, Arthur Mercer, lived very differently. He built one of the largest steel distribution companies in western Pennsylvania. Success came naturally to him, but relationships did not. He expected me to inherit the business one day, wear expensive suits, and spend my life negotiating contracts. Instead, I became a teacher. That decision created a distance between us that never truly disappeared. We argued when I was 24, and afterward our conversations became little more than holiday greetings and brief phone calls. Years passed. I got married, raised my daughter Sophia, and built a simple life while my father expanded his fortune. He barely knew his granddaughter. Every birthday, a check arrived in the mail with his signature. Every Christmas, a card appeared without a personal message. That was the extent of their relationship. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, everything changed. A lawyer called to tell me my father had died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84. I expected sadness, but what I felt most was uncertainty. It is difficult to grieve someone who spent decades keeping you at arm's length. 8 days later, I sat inside an attorney's office expecting to collect a few keepsakes, perhaps an old watch or family photographs. Instead, attorney Michael Harper placed a folder on the desk. "Your father amended his will 2 years ago," he explained calmly. I nodded, waiting for the details. "He left his entire estate to you." For several seconds, I thought I had misunderstood him. "The house, investment accounts, business proceeds, and remaining assets have all been transferred into the estate. After taxes and administrative costs," he glanced at a document before continuing, "the value is approximately $9 million. The words echoed inside my head. 9 million. I had spent my entire career teaching teenagers how to measure lumber accurately and safely operate power tools. Suddenly, I possessed more money than I had ever imagined earning in several lifetimes. Before I left, Michael handed me a sealed envelope. "Your father wanted you to read this in private." I drove home without turning on the radio. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table and opened the letter. It wasn't long. Arthur admitted he had been stubborn, confessed that he respected my decision to live honestly even if he never understood it, and wrote that leaving everything to me was the closest thing he could offer to an apology. By the time I reached the final sentence, tears blurred the ink. It couldn't give us back the years we had lost, but it answered questions I had carried for decades. That same night, I made another decision. I would tell no one. Not until I understood what to do with the inheritance. The timing made secrecy even more important because Sophia's wedding was only a few months away. She and her fiancé, Lucas Bennett, had been together for nearly 2 years. Lucas always appeared friendly, confident, and polite. He dressed well, spoke smoothly, and seemed to know exactly what to say in every situation. Yet something about him had always unsettled me. He asked unusual questions, not about hobbies or family traditions, about finances. One evening during dinner, he casually asked whether my father had ever planned to leave me anything. Another time, he wondered whether I had good retirement investments. He laughed after each question as if he were joking. but his eyes watched every reaction carefully. I dismissed the feeling. Perhaps I was simply being an overprotective father preparing to watch his only child start a new chapter. Still, as the wedding drew closer, Lucas became increasingly interested in subjects that had nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with money. At the time, I ignored those small warning signs. I had no idea they were the beginning of something far more dangerous. Wedding preparations consumed nearly every weekend that summer. Sophia insisted on keeping the ceremony elegant without becoming extravagant. She spent evenings comparing flower arrangements, tasting cake samples, and searching for decorations that fit within the budget she and Lucas had carefully planned. Whenever she apologized for the expenses, I reminded her that a wedding happened only once. At least that was the hope. Without revealing the truth about my inheritance, I quietly helped wherever I could. I paid the caterer directly, covered the venue deposit, and arranged for the photographer as my wedding gift. I simply told Sophia that I had been saving for years. She hugged me with tears in her eyes. Lucas thanked me too, but his gratitude always came with another question. "Retirement must have worked out pretty well for you," he said one afternoon while we loaded chairs into my truck. "I've been careful with money," I answered. He smiled. "Smart people usually have investments. I've managed." "What kind?" I looked at him. "The boring kind." He laughed, but I noticed the disappointment behind his smile. It wasn't the only time. During family dinners, Lucas casually brought up estate planning, retirement accounts, and property ownership. The conversations always sounded harmless, yet they somehow drifted back toward my finances. One evening he asked whether I had considered rewriting my will now that Sophia was getting married. I nearly dropped my fork. "Why would I need to?" "Just planning ahead," he replied quickly. "Life changes." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Dad's healthy. Stop talking like he's 90. Lucas chuckled and changed the subject, but something about his expression lingered in my thoughts long after dinner ended. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't what he asked. It was how carefully he watched every answer. As the wedding approached, his attention became even more noticeable. Whenever invoices arrived, he wanted to know who had paid them. When vendors thanked me, he asked whether I had received unexpected money. If someone complimented my generosity, he smiled politely while studying my face instead of joining the conversation. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. Years of teaching teenagers had taught me how to recognize hidden motives. Students often pretended to ask one question while secretly searching for another answer. Lucas reminded me of those students. Only he was much better at hiding it. The wedding itself was beautiful. The vineyard overlooked rolling hills painted gold by the late September sun. Strings of lights hung between old oak trees, soft music floated across the lawn, and laughter filled the evening air. Sophia looked happier than I had ever seen her. For those few hours, I pushed every uneasy feeling aside. I walked my daughter down the aisle, placed her hand in Lucas's, and wished them both a future filled with happiness. Then the speeches began. When Lucas stood to address the guests, I expected stories about how they met or funny memories from their relationship. Instead, he spent several minutes talking about security, financial responsibility, and building generational wealth. "It isn't enough to love each other," he said, raising his glass. "You have to protect your future and make smart decisions with family assets." Several guests applauded politely. I noticed confused glances around the tables. Even Sophia looked surprised. Later that evening, Lucas's mother, Linda Bennett, approached me near the reception hall. "You've been very generous," she said warmly. "I've done what any father would." She smiled. "Sophia's lucky. It's comforting knowing she's marrying into a family with stability." Her words sounded complimentary. yet they carried an odd weight. Before I could respond, she added quietly, "Young couples need support. Hopefully everyone keeps looking after each other." Then she walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd, wondering why the conversation left me so uncomfortable. Driving home after the reception, I replayed every strange remark in my mind. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Lucas simply enjoyed talking about money. Maybe Linda's comments meant nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone except Sophia seemed unusually interested in my finances. The newlyweds left for a 10-day honeymoon on the North Carolina coast, a trip I had paid for without telling them the real source of the money. When they returned, something changed. Lucas suddenly wanted to spend time alone with me. He called asking if I'd like lunch. He offered to help repair my fence. He volunteered to service my truck despite knowing almost nothing about engines. At first, I appreciated the effort. Perhaps he genuinely wanted a better relationship with his father-in-law. But during every visit, the conversations drifted toward the same subjects: retirement accounts, banking, property, investments, estate planning. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on my back porch drinking coffee when he leaned forward. "You know, Daniel, if anything ever happened to you, managing everything could become complicated for Sophia." I looked at him carefully. What exactly is everything? For the first time since I'd known him. Lucas hesitated. Lucas's hesitation lasted only a second before he smiled again. "I just mean your assets," he said casually. "Your house, retirement savings, whatever you've worked hard for. It would make things much easier if someone could help manage everything if you ever became ill." I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of coffee. "I've managed my affairs just fine for 61 years. "I'm sure you have," he replied. "I'm only thinking about the future." The conversation drifted elsewhere, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me long after he drove away. His questions had become too specific, too frequent, and too deliberate to ignore. It wasn't ordinary curiosity anymore. That evening, I called an old friend. Victor Hale and I had taught together for more than 2 decades before he retired and started working as a licensed private investigator. We still met for breakfast every few weeks, usually to complain about aching knees and how quickly technology had changed. This time, our conversation was very different. I told him everything. My father's death, the inheritance, keeping the money secret, Lucas's endless questions. Victor listened without interrupting. When I finished, he stirred his coffee slowly and asked a question I hadn't expected. "When exactly did Lucas propose to Sophia?" I thought for a moment. "Early April." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "And when did your father's estate become public through probate?" "I don't know. It usually doesn't take long." He pulled out his laptop. Within 15 minutes, he had located the probate filing through county records. The dates appeared on the screen in black and white. Arthur Mercer died in March. The estate filing became public during the first week of April. Lucas proposed just days later. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Victor looked at me. "Maybe it's coincidence," he said carefully. "But maybe it isn't." I stared at the screen. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider something I had been refusing to believe. What if Lucas hadn't fallen in love with my daughter alone? What if he had also fallen in love with what he believed she would eventually inherit? "I need facts," I said quietly. Victor nodded. "I'll look." Over the next 2 weeks, he dug into Lucas's background. The results surprised even him. Lucas had worked for 3 different companies in less than 6 years, each departure surrounded by vague explanations about better opportunities. More interestingly, Victor discovered Lucas had once been engaged to a woman named Rachel Evans, whose family owned a successful regional business. The engagement lasted less than a year. According to interviews Victor conducted with former acquaintances, the relationship ended shortly after Rachel's family sold the company and distributed the proceeds differently than expected. One former co-worker described Lucas as someone who was always searching for the next opportunity. Another remembered him becoming unusually interested whenever clients discussed inheritances or investment portfolios. None of it proved criminal behavior. None of it would stand as evidence in court, but together the pattern was impossible to ignore. Relationships, money, opportunity. Again and again. Victor placed a thick folder on my garage workbench. "I can't tell you what he's thinking," he said, "but I can tell you this isn't the first time someone's finances have become very important to him." I flipped through the pages. Employment records, public documents, interview summaries, timelines. Every page strengthened the uncomfortable picture forming in my mind. I didn't sleep much that night. Part of me wanted to confront Lucas immediately. Another part wanted to tell Sophia everything. Instead, I chose patience. If Lucas truly had dishonest intentions, sooner or later he would reveal them himself. I didn't have to wait long. About 3 weeks later, my phone rang. "Hi, Daniel," Lucas said cheerfully. "I've been talking with a financial advisor and he suggested something that could really help protect the family." "What kind of something?" "Just paperwork." "What paperwork?" "Nothing complicated. Mind if I stop by Saturday morning? It'll only take a few minutes." His answer felt rehearsed. Still, I agreed. "Saturday works." "Perfect." He sounded almost relieved. When the call ended, I sat quietly in my workshop, staring at the old pickup truck I'd been restoring for months. Every instinct I possessed told me that Saturday wasn't going to be an ordinary visit. Something important was about to happen. For the first time since inheriting my father's fortune, I began preparing instead of hoping I was wrong. Saturday morning arrived gray and unusually quiet. I woke before sunrise, made a pot of coffee, and unlocked my front door long before anyone arrived. The house felt different that morning. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was experience. Whatever it was, something told me this visit would answer every question I'd been asking myself for months. Before Lucas arrived, I placed my phone inside the pocket of my flannel shirt and started an audio recording. I wasn't trying to trap anyone unfairly. I simply wanted an accurate record of whatever happened. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. Lucas stepped out carrying a leather folder. Walking beside him was a professionally dressed woman I had never met. He smiled as if nothing were unusual. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning." He gestured toward the woman. "This is Olivia Reed. She's a licensed notary. She helps with paperwork for our financial advisor." I looked from Lucas to Olivia. "A notary?" Lucas chuckled. "Just to make everything official. It'll only take a few minutes." I invited them inside without another word. We gathered around the same kitchen table where Sophia had spent years doing homework while I cooked dinner after school. Seeing strangers sitting there with legal documents already made me uncomfortable. Lucas opened the folder and carefully spread several papers across the table. "I've been thinking about the future," he began. "After losing your father so unexpectedly, it reminded me how quickly life can change." I remained silent. "So my advisor recommended creating a family asset management plan." "What exactly does that mean?" "It simply allows someone you trust to assist with important financial matters if you're ever unable to handle them yourself." I looked down at the documents. Most of the language appeared ordinary at first glance, but one paragraph immediately caught my attention. It granted broad authority for financial communication with banks, investment firms, and estate representatives. I slowly raised my eyes. "And the person receiving that authority?" Lucas smiled. I would. The room became perfectly still. Olivia shifted uneasily in her chair but said nothing. Lucas leaned forward. This isn't about taking anything from you. It's about protecting Sophia. If something happened unexpectedly, we'd avoid delays and legal complications. I folded my hands together. When did you decide this was necessary? Recently. Recently? Yes. I nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. Lucas's smile began to fade. You see, I continued calmly, I've been doing a little research myself. His eyebrows lifted. I don't understand. I learned about Rachel Evans. The color drained from his face. Olivia looked back and forth between us, clearly realizing this conversation had taken a very different direction. I also learned about your previous employers, I continued, and your habit of becoming interested in other people's financial affairs. Lucas forced a laugh. Daniel, you've got the wrong idea. Do I? You've been investigating me? I wanted to understand why my finances seemed more interesting than my daughter's happiness. His expression hardened. That's unfair. Is it? I reached into a drawer and removed the folder Victor had prepared. Inside were employment records, public filings, interview summaries, and the probate timeline showing exactly when my father's estate became public. I placed the documents on the table one by one. You proposed to Sophia only days after learning about my inheritance. That's a coincidence. Perhaps. You can't prove why I proposed. No. I looked directly into his eyes. But I can prove you brought a notary into my home with documents giving you access to my financial affairs. Neither Lucas nor Olivia spoke. After several long seconds, I gently pushed the unsigned papers back across the table. I'm not signing anything. Lucas's friendly mask finally disappeared, his jaw tightened. You don't trust me. I trust actions. This was for the family. No, I replied quietly. It was for you. Olivia slowly gathered her briefcase. I think I should leave. I think that's best, I answered politely. She nodded, apologized for the misunderstanding, and walked out without another word. The front door closed behind her. Lucas remained seated. For a full minute, neither of us said anything. Finally, he stood. You're making a terrible mistake. I don't think so. Sophia won't believe this. I hope she believes the truth. He picked up the folder, shoved the papers inside, and headed toward the door. Before leaving, he turned one last time. If you tell her any of this, you'll destroy her marriage. I met his stare without blinking. If the truth destroys it? I paused. Then it wasn't much of a marriage to begin with. Lucas slammed the door behind him. The house fell silent again. I reached into my shirt pocket, stopped the recording, and looked at the small screen. Everything had been captured. Every word, every explanation, every denial. Now only one conversation remained. The hardest one of all. I picked up my phone and called Sophia. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. Sophia, I need you to come over. She immediately sounded worried. Is everything okay? I looked at the empty chair where Lucas had been sitting only moments earlier. No, I answered honestly. It isn't? Sophia arrived less than an hour later. The moment she stepped through the front door, she looked at my face and knew something was wrong. Dad, what's happened? I motioned toward the kitchen table. Sit down. She pulled out a chair slowly, her eyes moving from me to the folders lying neatly on the table. You're scaring me. I know. I poured 2 cups of coffee, more out of habit than anything else. Neither of us touched them. There are some things I should have told you months ago. She frowned. What things? I took a deep breath. When Grandpa Arthur passed away, he left everything to me. She looked confused. What do you mean by everything? Everything. I slid a copy of the estate documents across the table. The estate was worth just under $9 million. For several seconds, she simply stared at the papers, then she looked back at me. You inherited $9 million? I nodded. Her first reaction wasn't excitement, it was hurt. You didn't tell me? I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because I was afraid people would treat us differently after they found out. She sat quietly, trying to process everything. I never wanted money to become part of your marriage, I continued. I wanted to know that the people around you cared about you, not about what they thought you might inherit one day. She slowly lowered her eyes. Is this about Lucas? Yes. I handed her Victor's report. She spent nearly 20 minutes reading every page without saying a word. When she reached the timeline comparing the probate filing to Lucas's proposal, her expression changed. Then I played the audio recording from that morning. Lucas's voice filled the kitchen, his explanation, his request, his insistence that he should have authority over my finances. When the recording ended, the silence felt heavier than before. Finally, Sophia spoke. Last month. She stopped. What? He asked whether you'd updated your will since the wedding. I closed my eyes. What did you tell him? That it wasn't my business? She shook her head slowly. I thought it was an odd question, but I didn't think much of it. She looked up at me. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to protect the truth. Tears filled her eyes. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm grateful you trusted your instincts. That evening, Sophia returned home and confronted Lucas. According to her later, he denied everything at first. Then he blamed me. He claimed I had manipulated the situation by hiding the inheritance. He insisted the paperwork had only been meant as a precaution. But every explanation created new questions instead of answers. When Sophia asked why he had researched my finances before proposing, he had no convincing response. When she asked why a notary had appeared without warning, he changed the subject. When she asked why he had repeatedly questioned her about my will, he became angry. By the end of the conversation, she packed a suitcase and left. She stayed with a close friend while speaking with an attorney. Within weeks, she filed for an annulment. Lucas chose not to contest it. His mother, Linda, called several times, insisting everything had been misunderstood. Sophia listened politely during the first conversation. After that, she stopped answering. Some chapters of life don't deserve to be rewritten. They deserve to be closed. Months passed. The pain slowly gave way to peace. Sophia enrolled in a graduate program she had postponed because of wedding planning. She found a small apartment closer to my house, and Sunday dinners became our new tradition. As for the inheritance, we met with a reputable estate attorney and financial planner. Everything was documented properly. Everything was transparent. There were no surprises, no hidden signatures, no secret agendas. One evening, while we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Sophia smiled. You know something? What? If you had told everyone about the inheritance before the wedding? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We both knew exactly what would have happened. Lucas would have hidden his intentions more carefully. He might have waited years before making his move. Instead, patience revealed his character long before he gained any real control over our lives. I still think about my father sometimes. We lost too many years to pride and stubbornness. Yet in a strange way, his final decision gave me one last chance to protect the family he had never truly known. People often ask whether I regret keeping my inheritance a secret. My answer has never changed, not for a single day. Money can attract admiration, envy, kindness, or greed, but silence has a remarkable way of revealing who people really are. In the end, I didn't protect $9 million, I protected my daughter. And looking back, that was worth far more than any fortune my father could have left behind.